President Obama making his big push to deal with climate change today. We're going to talk to a conservationist who was at the White House today for the president's announcement, and he'll tell us, well, we need to do something to deal with this crisis, and fast. Then forget the email controversy and the Republicans. Could Hillary Clinton's biggest challenge be right in her own party? I'm talking about none other than Joe Biden, and how if he decided to run, it could cause a problem not just for Hillary, but for the White House. Also, comedian Amy Schumer just took on a new role, gun control advocate. We're going to tell you how she's working with her cousin, yeah, that guy, Senator Chuck Schumer, to help push his plan. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Well, we begin with President Obama unveiling what he calls the biggest step yet we have ever taken to deal with climate change. Here's what he had to say just a couple of hours ago.
I don't want my grandkids not to be able to swim in Hawaii or not to be able to climb a mountain and see a glacier because we didn't do something about it.
Over the next few years, each state will have the chance to put together its own plan for reducing emissions because every state has a different energy mix. Some generate more of their power from renewables, some from natural gas or nuclear or coal. And this plan reflects the fact that not everybody's starting in the same place. So we're giving states the time and the flexibility they need to cut pollution in a way that works for them. And we'll reward the states that take action sooner instead of later.
Now, a short time ago, I spoke to Collin O'Mara. He is the president and CEO of the National Wildlife Federation. He also was at the White House today for this announcement. Collin, you were there in person today, and also you've been helping to craft what the president announced today. First of all, put in context the significance of not only the president's address, but also the terms that he posited in, that this is a generational choice here, really for the future, not just obviously of the U.S. and even globally, of really a crossroads as to where we stand.
Yeah, I mean, I'm from upstate New York, and I don't need to tell any New Yorker about the significance of climate impacts. I mean, anyone that lived through Sandy has seen the effects. And so what the president very clearly said today was that this is the biggest threat facing the planet right now, and that we have a moral responsibility to take action for future generations, that we have a responsibility to low-income folks and communities that are at risk across the country, and making sure that having America have a leadership position today will help ensure that we have a global agreement, hopefully later this year in Paris.
I'm going to let you first guess, if you will, some of the responses from the other side. We've already heard some post the address, even pre the address. But talk about what a lot of scientists and environmentalists have said are canards, both in terms of not only loss of jobs here, the fact that basically we're going to be fighting on an unlevel playing field. Talk about some of the information that's going to come from the other side here in the coming days and weeks, and what the real answer is when they hear those concerns.
Right. So the science is settled. I mean, 98% of scientists agree that the climate is changing, that human contributions are the leading cause. And so there really is no debate in the science. The irony for me is that we hear these complaints about kind of these potential calamitous impacts on the economy every time there's a regulation. Seatbelts were going to destroy the auto industry. You know, the standards for air pollution in the 1990s to deal with acid rain were going to destroy the economy. We turned out stronger than ever. Every time these cries come out about economic collapse, they never actually materialize. We end up stronger, we end up innovating more, we end up creating more jobs in the long time. And frankly, it's not theory. In this case, New York and other leading states across the Northeast have been part of a trading program to reduce carbon emissions for the last 6 years. And emissions have gone dramatically down, almost 50%. And at the same time, the economy in most of these states is growing rapidly. So, I mean, we've seen these programs work well. We know they can at scale. And these folks trot out these same tired arguments every time. And frankly, this time, the consequences are too important for us not to succeed and triumph over them.
Well, talk about those consequences and also the opportunity. Let's look at this half full and say that, in effect, the states and Congress go along with the executive order that the president put forward here. In a perfect world, where could we be in 2030 if we applied all these new regs? And then give the counter. If we don't, where could we be 15, 20 years from now?
No, it's a great question. I mean, imagine in America where we're building energy, we're rebuilding our building stock across the entire country to make our buildings more efficient. Imagine we have tens of thousands of people working to deploy offshore wind turbines off the Atlantic Ocean, or building solar farms in different parts of the Southwest. I mean, imagine the manufacturing jobs that are possible if we were making those things in America with American labor actually installing those across the country. We could have a manufacturing renaissance in this country, and we could put construction trades to work at a scale we haven't seen in the last 20, 30 years. So the economic upsides of doing this well are incredibly important. I want those things made in America. I want them installed in America. I want the unemployment rate to go down in America because of those things. And I want energy costs to go down because we're more efficient with a modernized grid and better technologies. Now, the flip side is that if we don't do these things, we've seen the extreme storms in places like New York and places in the drought out west. We've seen these extreme consequences. Imagine that happening year after year. Low-income communities are going to be decimated in many parts of the country if we don't take action. The impacts on wildlife alone that we have not talked nearly enough about during the rollout of this plan are extremely consequential. There are thousands of species at risk right now because of changes to their habitat. So, the consequences of inaction are almost unthinkable in some ways. And as someone that has a 3-year-old daughter, the idea that we're turning over a planet that could have one of these two futures, and we're not doing everything we can to choose a more sustainable, more resilient one, it just seems like an opportunity we have to seize.
Finally, what do you say to somebody say, hey, you know what, that sounds all well and good, but if China and India don't go along with this, we're basically screwing the American worker because we're not playing on that same level playing field. It doesn't make any sense unless everybody goes along to get along. Why should we have to take the lead?
I mean, if America wants to be a global leader, and we have been, really since the Second World War, right? We've been the global leader economically, the global leader militarily, the global leader in culture. If we want to have that leadership position, we have to actually lead. And we can't expect anyone else to be the first mover in this. We are one of the largest economies in the world. We have to make sure that we're doing our part. And we've already seen when the president took action by just announcing his intention to have this plan, it really strengthened his hand to negotiate with the Chinese. It led to negotiations with the Indians. The only way that we're going to have a global agreement is if America's part of that deal. And at the same time, I would argue that even if they are slower than us, even if they are not having as aggressive standards, the ability for us to strengthen manufacturing, construction jobs, that's an opportunity. We want them, frankly, buying our goods. Instead of buying cheap panels from China, I want them buying panels that are made in upstate New York that are shipped around the world. So, I think there's a first mover advantage here, and that if we don't do our part, I don't know how we expect anyone else to.
Finally, Collin, as we sit here now, are you optimistic that in effect, albeit late, we've seen the light and we're going to do something about it legislatively and otherwise? Or are you worried that A, we waited too long, and B, our kids' generation, our grandkids' generation, they're going to be inheriting an earth here much different than a lot of people imagine it's going to really be in 20, 30, 40, 50 years?
Yeah. I mean, I'm very optimistic. I am proud of the president. I mean, there are impacts that we're going to see, right? We're already seeing some of these storms. We're already seeing the droughts. We're already seeing the climate disruption. By acting now, we can mitigate the worst impacts that we could otherwise see. And so overall, I'm a conservation. I have to be optimistic by my very nature. Otherwise, it's just kind of tough to go on. But at the end of the day, the investments that we make today, the actions that we take today will pay dividends for generations to come. And I want to be on the right side of history, making sure that future generations, they say, why did you do what you did? I want to make sure that we can say we did everything we can because we wanted to make sure we had a more sustainable planet for future generations. There's a lot of folks on the other side of that argument right now, and I just don't want to have any regrets for my daughter, for my grandkids in the future, to worry about us not doing everything we possibly could to pass on a healthier planet for them.
Collin O'Mara, I appreciate a few minutes. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Richard.
And like in everything, there are politics that are a part of this. When we come back, we're going to bring a panel in to talk about those politics, especially in the wake here of an election coming next year. Stay with us, everybody. Be right back.